Now, for more insight into China's second-hand car market, we're joined by Alysha Webb. She's managing partner at communication and strategy company Cross-Pacific Partner. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Alysha, China, as we mentioned, is already the world's largest car market. But how big is China's second-hand car market?
I think it's due to reach some 20 million in a few years, but there are still a lot of problems with that market. You know, even though there are a lot of cars, it doesn't mean that there's going to be a vibrant market for them.
And give us an idea, some of these problems that you're talking about, what could be some of the barriers limiting this area's growth?
Well, you know, they've got the new policy that your reporter just discussed, and that will improve supply and it will reduce local protectionism. But some of the major barriers to used car sales in China are the legal system. There's not a good regulatory system to support the quality of the cars. Also, consumer trust is a huge problem, and that's tied to the fact that there's nothing that can guarantee the quality of the cars. So until you have consumer trust and something that will tell them the car they're buying is, in fact, a good car, I think that's going to hurt sales of used cars.
So, Alysha, as you mentioned consumer trust, in countries like the US, you have companies like Carfax that can help you get more information about a car's background and its repair history. So are there any plans to have something comparable in China, or does anything there already exist?
I think there are companies that are similar to Carfax in China, but their scale is much smaller. And China still doesn't have the proper regulatory system in place to have those kinds of checks, such as the Carfax provides.
Now, one of the regulations that we saw that China's State Council has lifted the limits on these second-hand cars in certain regions. But how much of an impact do you think the new guidelines will actually have on the car market in China?
You know, they're certainly going to increase supply of used cars across provincial boundaries. But not all provinces are actually going to adhere to these right away. So I think that their impact in the short term will be somewhat limited. That is, until we can expand other guarantees for consumers, I think it's going to take more.
And let's also speak to the mindset of consumers. As we've said, in the past, they've tended to prefer the newer cars over the second-hand vehicles. But now, as we heard, US used car sales are now surging. So what does that mean then in terms of when they're pricing a new car at the moment?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. The impact that we're seeing more second-hand vehicles that could potentially at some point overtake new vehicles. What do you think having this dichotomy then will do when it comes to how new car sales are priced?
Well, you know, pricing is an issue I didn't mention, but is also an issue in China in the used car market. It's called a residual value. It's what a used car is worth. And China does not have a good system to put a value on residuals for used cars. So that's another problem. But in terms of what that's going to do to the new car market, I think it might hurt it a little bit. I mean, there's another option now. Used cars used to be considered bad items, but as consumers become more confident, and even now, they're starting to consider used cars as a good value investment. So I think this could be a problem that China's new car dealers face in the future. However, if I might add, if the new car dealers in China are able to also bring in used car sales, that would be a really important source of income for them. So I think that could help offset any decline in new car sales.
Now, Alysha, just lastly, as we look ahead, how does opening up this second-hand market play into China's need to curb emissions and try and make their cars greener?
That's a tough one. I know that your reporter was just talking about how one of the problems with opening up the used car market is that the older cars do not meet the emission standards. If China does not enforce those emission standards all across the used car market, then it's certainly going to have a bad impact on the air quality.
Well, it's something we'll definitely be keeping an eye on. Thank you so much for joining us, Alysha Webb, Managing Partner at Cross-Pacific Partner.
Thanks so much for having me.